Good morning, my name's Jay. I'm one of the pastors here at Chapel. I don't get to come over to this campus a whole lot, so I'm really excited that I get to enjoy the first service a good bit and got to see some friends that I hadn't seen in a while, so it's good to be here with y'all. I like having a small, intimate crowd, so this will be we can kind of just dialogue and talk, so I hope that you'll feel free to, shout out or answer questions or ask questions, and we'll kind of dialogue through this. My wife Kim and I, Cynthia's friend Kim, we're repurposing our downstairs, and thank you for your help in hooking us up with Gracie to get her desk. It's beautiful. You got to come by and see it. I love it. So I'm making a prayer room downstairs in the house and a little home office where I can do some work at the house. It's really coming along great. We built our house about 15 years ago for the purpose of starting this church. So downstairs, we call it the basement, it's really just downstairs, was the church. And then we live, and still do, upstairs. So we put a bathroom downstairs for the congregation and the bathroom up for us. So now we're kind of repurposing. We're doing a series on God building His church. And I'm sort of struck by, functionally, what do you think He had in mind when He's building His church? What was He designing it for? It would be like, what is the purpose of the house? Obviously, I think one of the things is prayer. That Jesus said that my Father's house should be a house of prayer. So it should be a place that people connect and pray with God. What are some of the other things for which you think God might be intending His house to be?
Fellowship.
Fellowship, absolutely. And you even think back to the original temple courts, and you have these outer courts of porches for fellowship. He wants people to connect. It's interesting that God really is connecting this relationship with this relationship. The two are linked. So yeah, fellowship is certainly a part of it. What else? What's that? Worship, absolutely. Absolutely, that it's intended to be a place where we come together corporately to acknowledge His worth, to declare His worth, to praise Him. Absolutely. Prayer, fellowship, worship. Yes, sir.
Worthy.
What did he say?
Worthy.
Worthy, yeah, exactly. That He's worthy. That's what we're doing when we worship. To say He's worthy. Perfect, absolutely.
Service.
Say again?
To serve.
To serve, yeah, that we come here and we serve each other and His people, and then we go forth from here to serve His town, His community. There's one other thing I think that God intended that it doesn't come up quite as quickly, and that is to be a place where miracles happen, where lives are transformed, that they're altered, that people leave different than when they came. It's interesting because before Jesus, the Jewish people, who were the people of God, had an understanding of God's holiness, His worthiness, and His call for us to be holy. But their method of being holy or righteous or clean was all based on separating from that which might defile. In other words, you can't get near anything dirty because that would make you dirty. So you had to isolate, you had to separate, you had to distance yourself from anything that would defile you or make you unrighteous. But God seems to change that with Jesus and basically says, God is so holy that when unholy comes in contact, it doesn't make the holy unholy, it makes the unholy holy. That when He comes in contact with brokenness, He makes it whole. When He comes in contact with wrong, He makes it right. When He comes in contact with a sinner, He restores. And that's the miracle. That's the miraculous work of God, the power of God working in us and through us. I think we do in our church today, in our world today, we're okay on prayer. I think we need to be better on that. We need to be deeper in that. We need to pray more. I think we're really probably pretty good in worship. I don't think we need to lessen the worship any. I think we need to raise the other components up with it. I think we're pretty good on fellowship, but I'm not sure we're experiencing the full power of God in miraculous ways like He desires and wants. Which makes me want to go, why? I mean, why are we not experiencing that? If God is able and God is willing, what's happening. So that's what I want us to look at today, is building the infrastructure in a church, the framework, if you would, the wiring or the pipes that will allow us to experience the full power of God in miraculous ways, life-changing ways. And the way I want us to do that is to look at Jesus' first miracle. And what we're looking for is there there's a need that needs to be met, a problem that needs to be solved. There's something that needs miraculous power to make it right. There's something that's wrong that needs to be made right. Something that's broken that needs to be made whole. And then I know that there's got to be a sovereign move of God. There's going to be the power of God that does the impossible. But I'm wondering if there's another variable of receptivity on our part that equals miracle. So there's need plus God's power plus our receptivity equals miracle. And I'm wondering what that our part is. So that's what we're going to look at.
Yeah, I think sometimes I think that our hearts and our minds are not lined up and really focused on God.
Absolutely, yeah. Our hearts and our minds, which results in our life not being aligned with Him. Absolutely, that we've got to get in alignment in order to put it into the electrical bill. You've got to get plugged in. If you're not plugged in, the power's not going to run through. It's not that there's not power there. The power's there. We're just not tapping into it. So that's what we're going to look at, is how do we do that? What does it specifically mean to do that? And we're going to go to the Gospel of John. And there's a couple things you need to understand about John when he writes. The Gospel of John, my favorite of the Gospels, my favorite book of the Bible. John writes on simultaneous different levels. So he's talking about this, he is talking about this, but he's also talking about this. So he means this, but he also means this. So for instance, the miracles is a perfect example. When John records and talks about the miracles that Jesus did, he's talking about a specific tangible moment in history of a reality of what Jesus did, but he uses it to point to an eternal truth about the nature and character of God. So for instance, he'll have Jesus raising somebody from the dead. It's a historic, specific event that happened that he's telling us about. But John is using that as an illustration of God as the source of all life. All life arise from Him. Or the feeding of the multitude. He's pointing to Jesus. God is the provider of all that we have, all the time. So there's these two meanings. The symbol for the Gospel of John, every Gospel has a different symbol. And the Gospel of John symbol is an eagle. And the reason is that an eagle soars up to great heights and can fly straight toward the sun. That they have the special eyes that allow them to look straight into the sun and not be blinded. John is writing his Gospels to elevate our sight up from the tangible daily lives, to look straight into the glory of God and not be blinded or destroyed by that. So we're going to look at this example of a miracle of Jesus, because John is using it to show us how God always operates. Okay? So let's pray, and then we're going to go to John chapter 2. We'll look about verses 1 through 10. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word and the way that it can help us align our lives with your will, our mind and our heart and our actions to all be right in the center of what you're calling us to do and be, so that your power might work through us to create miracles in this world that brings you glory. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Okay, John chapter 2 says, on the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. A couple things I want to point out. Number one, it's a party. This is the actual wedding ceremony is taking place, and now it's a party. Jesus liked to party. He goes to parties a lot. He's a party animal. I mean, this guy liked to go to party. He had a good time. If he were here in the flesh today, and you were to throw a rock the block party in your neighborhood, Jesus would come. Okay, he liked to have a good time. Somehow we've depicted Jesus as like not any fun and solemn and upset. No, he was very happy and liked to party. Second thing I want you to see is who is in attendance at this wedding. the stories about Jesus, so there's other people. Obviously, the bride and groom are there, and there's the guests. But this passage tells us everybody that was related to Jesus. And it says that his mother was there and his disciples were there. Now, the interesting thing to note is there's no mention of Joseph. Joseph is Jesus' earthly father. He's not at the party. And the reason is he's already passed. He's died. He died when Jesus was fairly young. Which is interesting to note because that means that Jesus, as the oldest child, became the head of the household. He had to provide for his mother and his family. He went to work. He most likely took over his father's carpentry business. So he had to make sales and build product and order inventory and do all the things that you do in your work. He had household chores. He had to, cut the grass or mow the dirt or whatever they did in that time. Take out the trash and stuff. I think that I often think about the divinity of God. He's full of Jesus. He's fully God. But sometimes I don't realize he's also fully human. And he was able to do the things that he did on earth, not because he flipped off his humanity switch and flip on his divinity switch, but because as a fully human person, he had set aside for a season his divinity, but he hadn't set aside his intimacy with God. And it was his intimacy with God that enabled him to walk with his mind and his heart in alignment with God. Third thing I want us to see is that the way the weddings worked in the Jewish culture this day is that the couple didn't go away on honeymoon. They stayed there and just partied for like a week or more. So that's the season that we're in. The celebration is over. All the out-of-town guests have gone away. All the dignitaries, all the important people that just came for the service, they've left. And now we have this smaller but still significant gathering of family and friends that's just partying for a week. And here's what's convicting to me about that. We're going to see in just a moment that Jesus is going to do his first public miracle. I mean, this is where he's going to show and demonstrate who he is and the power in which he's operating. And he does it among family and friends. He doesn't do it at the halftime of the Super Bowl. He doesn't do it on this big, huge public platform. He does it with family and friends. He does it in an intimate gathering. Which is convicting to me because sometimes I feel like I might give my best in public and my leftovers to my family and to my friends. They don't get the best of me. That is not following the model of Jesus. Jesus gives his best to this inner circle. Now, he certainly had big crowds and did things out there too. But his best went to those that were closest to him. And sometimes I feel like, maybe you too, we go to work and we put on our best and we do that and we come home and we're just not as quick to serve and to care there. So that's what's going on. Then it says, when the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. Several things I want to point out there. One, it's a huge social faux pas to run out of wine at this wedding ceremony. It conveys that you have no means, that you're poor, that you have no friends, and you have no family, because surely if you did, they would come to your aid and help. It might also show that you're a poor planner, that you didn't prepare well. And then Mary, for some reason, seems to take the responsibility of doing something about that, which makes you wonder why she feels the need. Could be because Jesus and his buddies drank all the wine, so she feels like, hey. More likely, it's because she is the hostess. She's throwing the party, which would mean that she's probably related to the bridegroom who's throwing the party. Scholars believe that is in fact the case, that Mary's sister was Salome, that Salome was the mother of the bride. Mother of the groom. And Salome's son is John, the guy that wrote this book, one of Jesus' disciples. So it's very likely and probable that the author of this book is telling a story about his wedding, where Jesus did his first miracle. Also, what is interesting to me is that it doesn't appear that she tried to do a fundraiser to get money to go buy more wine, or went to the store to see if more wine was available, or did anything except go straight to Jesus. The first thing she did was go to Jesus. And I'm convicted because when I have a situation, too often, that's the last thing I do. I mean, first I try to handle it myself. Second, I try to go to my friends, see if they can handle it. Then I strategize. And then when I've got to the end, there's nothing I can do, then I'll go, well, I guess I'll pray about it. But that's the first step that Mary takes. And the way she prays is very convicting to me. Her prayer is this: they have no more wine. Here's the situation. And what's interesting to me about that is she doesn't tell him what to do. When I look at my prayer life, boy, I sure do have the audacity to tell God what to do a lot. I don't just tell him what to do, I tell him how to do it and when to do it. Which points to all kinds of misunderstanding about the nature of my relationship with God. He tells me what to do. I don't tell him what to do. But my prayer life doesn't reflect that. She just goes to him and says, they have no more wine. Here's the situation. And then his response is disturbing. Woman, why do you involve me? Jesus replied. My hour has not yet come. Now, we don't have the tone, so we don't know exactly how that came across, but it sure sounds like, psst, be gone, squirrel, to me. I mean, it seems like a dismissal. It seems like, why are you bothering me with this? That's not my problem. I don't care, is the way it seems to me. And if I'm honest, that's the response I feel like I get from God sometimes. I mean, I don't hear God saying that. I just feel that way when he doesn't do what I want, when I want, how I want. I feel like that he's going, I don't care, it's not my problem. You deal with it. It's not a big enough issue. You're not important enough to me. I think it's okay to feel that. It's how you respond when you feel that way. When you're not getting what you want, how you want, when you want. What do you do about that? Again, my response is just the opposite of Mary. I'm convicted by Mary's response. Mary's response was this. His mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. I have no idea what he's going to say. He might say, wine's gone, party's over, go home. But whatever he says, do that. To have that kind of trust that I don't know what he's going to say, but I know whatever he says is right. I don't know how God's going to deal with this situation, but I know that whatever he does is right, even if it's not what I want. Now, not to exalt Mary too much, there's some speculation that our understanding of the word, of the phrase, woman, why do you involve me with this, is not, it doesn't come across in their culture, in their day, as quite as dismissive. And it ties to this word woman. For us, woman, and that's the way it sounds to us, that there is some speculation that it might translate better in, to put it in southern terms, my lady, why are you bringing me into this? You know my time hadn't come yet, but you also know I can't deny you. You're my mom, my lady. You know, it's actually the same word that Jesus used when he was on the cross, dying on the cross. So he's hanging on the cross, and Mary is there weeping, and John is there weeping, and he says, my lady, behold your son. Son, behold your mother. So it's a little bit more of a respectful connotation, perhaps. But regardless, it still is no guarantee of what he was going to do. But she simply says, do whatever he tells you. And so then look what happens. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars the kind used for the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." A couple things to say there. John, he's always writing on multiple levels. So he's talking about this specific thing, but he's using it as an illustration. To the Jews, he's doing this play, six jugs, big jars full of ceremonial washing. 6 is a code number. It means something. Its significance is in its relationship to the number 7. Okay, 7 is the number for completion. It is fulfilled. It is complete. When you get 7, it's fullness. 6 is not 7. You missed it by this much. It means incomplete, insufficient, not quite enough. Okay? So what John is saying to the Jews is these 6 jars of ceremonial washing are a metaphor for the law. And he's going, the law is insufficient. It is just this much short of fulfillment. It won't quite get you there. But Jesus is coming to do a new thing that brings completion. To the Greeks that are there. So Greeks, they have a whole bunch of gods. They create sort of a folklore god for whatever it is they want. Okay? So they have this legend, this folklore, this dream god that doesn't exist, and they know it doesn't, but they wish it did. The god of wine. And the god of wine can turn water into wine. They know it can't happen. But they're going, wouldn't it be cool if there was a God that could turn water into wine? And what John is going, there is. That all these little things that you're dreaming of and you're trying to create gods that can do it, Yahweh can exceed it, can do it in abundance. He will make better wine than you can imagine and more wine than you could comprehend. And so what John is saying is that this God can complete what the law can't, and he can do what you wish your little man-made gods could do. He can do miracles. But there has to be a need. There has to be his power. And then this human response. I see at least 3 human responses of aligning the mind and the heart that happened in this. There's a need. There's no more wine. Okay? What are the 3 actions that people took that were a part of the miracle? What do you see? Filling the jugs, okay? So she says, do whatever he says. He says, go fill the jugs with water. Now, interestingly enough, in this day, water is actually pretty precious. Drinking water is rare, and you have to labor to get it. So they're saying, take this water, lots of water, and pour it into these barrels. Pour it out. You're in a sense, priming the pump. So there is this step of obedience of going, take this resource, this thing, and give it away. Okay, pour it out. Because what if it didn't? What if you just poured it in there for washing your hands? Then all that good drinking water was wasted. So that's certainly one. What else happened to happen?
Mary's faith in her son.
Yeah, Mary had to have the faith to go to her son and say, here's the situation. So you got to bring it to God, and then to say, "Hey, do whatever He says." So that trust to obey Him. So there is the step of taking it to Him, and then the saying yes to Him, and then the second step is filling the water, and then there's one more crucial step.
Go show it.
Exactly. Go take the water out. Jesus said, "Take the water, get a cup, and take it to the master of ceremonies." And I'm wondering if that wasn't the hardest step. I mean, Mary, she has this intimate relationship with Jesus. Okay? So it's huge. But when you have that intimate relationship with Jesus, you're going to trust Him. You know to take the need to Him. Okay? And so then Jesus says to these guys, hey, go fill these things up with water. So they do. But then He says, now get a cup, walk up to the podium in front of everybody, and hand the master of ceremonies this glass of wine, which you know is water. But He takes it up there. What if it's just dirty, nasty water. How embarrassing is that going to be? Here's where I'm going, okay? The infrastructure, the wiring, the piping on our part for miracles to happen is obedience. It's doing whatever God says, aligning our mind and our heart and our life with His will. And sometimes that's in the privacy of just crying out to God. Sometimes it requires a discipline that's done in private that costs you something. It's a costly giving, but sometimes what it may cost you is your reputation. If I do that and He doesn't do a miracle, it could be very embarrassing. But they took these steps. And I think when we take the steps of being obedient to God, that's when miracles happen. He's always willing, He's always able, He's always has the power. We just tend to be a little bit slow in doing what He says. Now, when I talk to most people about that, their response is, I would be glad to do what He said if I knew what it was He was saying. If I knew what He wanted, I would do it, but I struggle to go, does He want me to do this? Does He want me to do that? I'm not really sure. I need it like concrete. I need it like tangible. For me, I gotta see the handwriting on the wall. I got to have it written down, to which He says, that's what I did. I wrote it down so you can read it and reread it. To which we go, yeah, but that's like a general word for everybody. I want like a new word. I want a specific word for what am I specifically supposed to do in this circumstance. To which I think God would say to us, when you start doing what I've already told you to do, then we'll talk about the next step of what else I want you to do. You know, you're wanting to go straight to graduate school. Well, let's start getting through elementary school and middle school and high school before we start jumping to other stuff. We're waiting on God to say something. God's waiting on us to do what He's already said. Now, I don't know everything that God is calling you to do in the Bible. But there are certain things I know He's calling us to do. And if you're needing a new word, it might be smart to check and see if you've done these things yet. I know He's calling us to give our life to Him. Now, a lot of us have asked Him, and you wouldn't be here if you hadn't, have asked Him to be a part of our life. That's not what I'm talking about. That's very different than giving Him your life. It would look like this, okay? Hey, Jesus, so here's the situation. They've run out of wine, and we need some more wine. And I know you're really smart, and you got a lot of things, so if you would give me a suggestion of what you would like to do, I'm going to talk it over with these other people, and then we'll pick which option we want to take. When you give your life to God, it's do whatever He says. Jesus, have no more wine. I'm going to do whatever you say. For a lot of us, we'll weigh our options of what God is saying, what logic says, what the world is saying, and then we'll try to make the wisest choice. That's not giving your life to Christ. That's having Him be a part. Giving your life to God means this: I'm going to go ahead and sign the check, and then God, you tell me how much to write it for, or who to send it to. It's already a yes. You can't correctly say, no, Lord. If He's Lord, it's always yes. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. If you say no, Lord, then He's not really Lord. And I think our culture today has allowed us to settle for letting Christ be a part of our life. Like our job is a part. You can't serve two masters. You will love the one and hate the other, or hate the one and love the other. God wants to be Lord. He wants you to give Him your life fully. But that's not just hypothetical. That relates to give Him your time. That means your years and your days and your moments. That you look at them and go, God, for your purpose, I will use this time. For your glory, I will use this day. Not for my pleasure, not for my comfort, but the way I spend my time is going to be for your kingdom and your glory. God calls us to use our talents for his kingdom's glory. Now, you have gifts and graces, and God certainly wants you to use those to provide for your family. That's part of the way that the reason he gave them to you. But ultimately, he created you to bring him glory. I have a friend who was in law school. He grew up poor, and there was a wealthy family kind of took him in and ended up sending him to college and on to law school. And so he had this heart for less fortunate people. So while he was in law school, he was helping out in this inner city ministry with inner city kids. God moved on his heart, and he was working with the head of the ministry, and he says, I feel like God's calling me to not pursue law school and becoming, a lawyer, but that God's calling me to use my life and my talents to serve kids, which sounds like a noble thing. But this guy who runs the ministry was so smart. He says, look, please don't do that. Please don't. God has gifted you with the talent of a brilliant mind, and you are articulate and you're logical and you can argue, you can debate. You have no skills at all about working with kids. You're not good at this. This is not your gift set. Go be a lawyer and be as successful as you can possibly be, and use that talent to make as much money as possible so you can fund ministries like this. This is not your talent. That is your gift. Use that gift for the glory of God. Everybody's not supposed to be a pastor of a church, but everybody is to use the talents that God's given them for their glory. A musician, you use your talents and you go out and you play and you can make money doing that, and you do. Yet you also use it for God's kingdom and God's glory. That's what I'm talking about. Whatever your gift set is, whatever your talent is, how can you use that for God's glory? And then the platform that God gives you, the influence that he gives you, God's calling us to use it to point people to him, to bring him glory. Not to use the platform that God's given you for vanity and for personal gain. But everybody that looks at you, you point them to Jesus. And I believe that God is calling all of us to use our blessings to bless others. The time, the influence, the money, everything that God has given you and blessed you with, he wants you to use that to bless others. And here's the miracle then, okay? Because the reality is, the real blessing, the real reward, the real value is not in being blessed. It is in being a blessing. That's the real gift. It's when God gives you more than enough to meet your need, so that you can begin to take the excess and overflow to other people. So that's when you begin to have your deepest needs. Not your Maslow's hierarchy of needs, not your basic needs. Your deep, deep needs are only met when you begin to lay down your life and live for others. When you begin to overflow to bless others. Meaning, having a life that has meaning and purpose and significance and value and worth. You only discover that when you begin to be a blessing for others. God blesses you. The blessing is not in the blessing. It is in the being the blessing. That's when you start going, oh, this is awesome. So, if we want to see more power of God work in our lives, we've got to align our head and our heart and our hands. We've got to do what he's called us to do. It's obedience. Obedience in the little things. In the daily things. And when you start getting those, it's going to build up, and so that you're ready for the big things. We kind of want this big, huge, great call of God. We're riding in the sky and go, I'll do that. And he's going, why would I think you're going to do that when you're not doing these things? When you start seeing consistency here, there's a cumulative effect to our consistency. When we do the right thing in the little things, day in, day out, year in, year out, decade after decade, he's forging a character in us that can sustain the power of him working through us. So, do whatever he says. Will you pray with me?